Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm Ryan Gilchrest, Managing Editor of Post and Courier Greenville. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to be talking a bit about development, especially along the Reedy River in Greenville. We'll touch on some other subjects as we go along, but certainly as anyone who's in Greenville or has been here anytime recently knows, there's plenty to cover along the development front. So we will try to hit as many questions as possible today. If you do have questions as we go along, please drop them in the question and answer, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the time allowed. Before we get started, I do want to introduce my co-panelists today. First is Eric Connor. Eric, say hello and tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Well, hey everybody. I'm Eric Connor. I cover city government. I'm part-time editor here for our operation. I've been covering the upstate for 20 years previously with the Greenville News, and been covering the city for about 5 or 6 years. Sometimes I can't remember, but.
All right, and making her debut with Post and Courier Greenville, we have Stephanie Mirah. Stephanie, hello. Glad to have you as part of this, and tell the folks a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Stephanie Mirah. I cover business and education. I'm new to the upstate, Greenville specifically. I only moved here about a month ago at this point. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, and I just moved here from Washington, D.C. I'm a recent graduate from American University.
All right, so let's dive right into it. We do have a lot to cover. There are a lot of major projects going on downtown, especially along the river. We want to touch on several of them today. Unity Park, the Grand Bohemian, possible moving of City Hall, United Community Bank headquarters that's going to be starting up, new conference center, a lot of the other things that are going on that are pretty close to that area as well. Eric, why don't we get started with you, and let's start with kind of the big project right now. Where does it stand with Unity Park? What's next? What's the status, and what's going on there?
Well, Unity Park would, I guess, when it comes to, in terms of the city, would be considered the headwaters of everything that's happening along the river. It's been 6 years in the making, pretty much. The original plan was to open in spring of 22. And during COVID, there was maybe some questions about whether that would be able to happen, and it appears that they're on track. Probably one of the most obvious signs of progress is that they reopened a part of the Swamp Rabbit Trail back on July 9th. They had been doing a lot of work along the river and other types of work. The river work is not completely done, but you can see a huge difference. They're moving more towards some of the elements of like the children's playground and the spray ground. And overall, they're on track.
I know they've been, we had a question from a reader related to erosion and flooding and things like that. I know that's certainly been an issue, in the past. Part of what they're doing over at the park addresses some of these concerns, correct?
It does. I mean, historically, the Unity Park area for many years was, it's always been a low-lying area, basically a swampland in some places where public works was, and traditionally underprivileged and often forgotten, and basically literally a dumping ground. And part of the problems they had was flooding over the years. And way back, early part of the 20th century, the railroad line, they took the Reedy River from its natural flow and channeled it, which basically caused, whenever there was a big rain, for the water to jump over the banks and cause a lot of flooding. So one of the initiatives of the Unity Park project was to take the river and create a more natural bank that expands out and can accommodate flooding, and it's meant to help with flooding that ends up downriver in Cleveland Park and elsewhere in Falls Park. So they've done that, and you can really see it, the wider banks of the river, and that's what that's about. It's meant to also allow the water to naturally be absorbed, and that's basically one way that they're trying to solve erosion and flooding, both in Unity Park and down the river.
that's included some work with trees along the bank too. Didn't they have like some invasive trees and some other things that they'd had to do some work on?
Yeah, they removed a lot of invasive species, and it actually, if you look at it, it looks like they just went and cleared everything out. And it looks like, well, was this really preservation along the river? And you'll see some like bare stump stick type of things, and that's an intentional thing that they've done. The engineers had a specific plan, and so the expectation is everything will grow up as it's supposed to over time.
What's next there? I know there were pedestrian bridges and things like that going in. Is that the next step?
Right. Yeah. So along with the opening of the Swamp Rabbit Trail, they opened the bridge pedestrian bridge along Hudson Street. The big one is the Oro Bridge. That's going to be the main bridge that connects both sides of Unity Park across the Rudy River. That one's going to be coming in and opening up basically when the park opens. But there's at least one bridge that you can see, although the park is not ready to be used yet.
Right. And that section that they opened for the Swamp Rabbit Trail through Unity Park, that's the new section, right? Now the old section is closed, and eventually there'll be two paths through there, correct?
Right. So the traditional where the trail would go behind the Swamp Rabbit CrossFit, that was closed, and that part is still closed. The part that's on the side of where the Commons is, where you find the community tap and all of that, where the warehouses and everything, that's a new trail. And for months since the winter, you've had to take this long trek down Mayberry Street to bypass. And as of July 9th, that other part of the trail, the new part of the trail, is open. And then later on, the old part of the trail.
I think we lost you there for a second, Eric. Maybe having some connection issues. Let me come back to you in a minute. And Stephanie, let's go to you for a couple of things. I do want to talk a little bit more about Unity Park, Eric, though, so hang on there. Let's go a little bit further down the river and talk about one of the projects that every time somebody comes to town for the first time, the first thing they ask is, what is that thing? The new Grand Bohemian Hotel that's opening up down there, right at the foot of the falls. You got a chance to go inside of it, look around, talk to some folks. What'd you learn?
Yeah, so it's so funny because I feel like I was one of those people that when I came to Greenville, I was like, what is that? And I did. I got to do a site visit at the end of June and get toured around by their project manager, Peter Warner. So the company behind the Grand Bohemian is called the Kessler Collection. They are a specialty hotel and restaurant company. So they have about 12 other hotels that are similar to the Grand Bohemian across the United States in places like Asheville, Charlotte, Charleston, and now Greenville. So I got to go inside, and we started at the entrance, closer to the street side than the falls side. You won't see any parking at the Grand Bohemian. It is a valet-only property, as they call it. And right as you enter into this massive lobby that, while currently still under construction, so not, Peter had to help me visualize a little what we'd be seeing. Right as you enter to the left-hand side, there's a huge fireplace that you'll see. Right behind you, there'll be a lobby bar, and right next to the bar, there'll be a set of elevators to take you to the 8 floors that make up the Grand Bohemian. There'll be about 187 rooms that will be available to use, and 5 different accommodations, or amenities, I guess. So we have a restaurant, a bar, art gallery, a spa, and a fitness center. And everything but the fitness center will be available for the public to use. So I went through all those different places, got to go out onto the terraces to see how the restaurant and the bar will be able to overlook the falls. According to Peter, this will be one of the only places in downtown that you'll be able to eat and look at the falls at the same time. And so when I was thinking about it, probably the next closest place that you'd be able to do that is the Passerelle Bistro. So now you have another option, and this time you're even closer. So yeah, it was really cool.
I thought one of the interesting details in your story was the staircase from the bar down to the foot of the falls, which is interesting because right now you can't really access that side, of the falls. So I thought that was an interesting detail.
Yeah, that was.
And of course, this is along East Camperdown Way, which has seen quite a bit of development get started up or about to start up, which kind of takes us to our next piece. The next property down, which was previously White's Law Firm at 200 East Camperdown Way, but is pretty soon going to start being the construction site for United Community Bank's headquarters. What do we know about that? And is that still on track for early next year?
That is still on track. So yes, United Community Bank will be has already moved their headquarters to Greenville from Blairsville, Georgia, earlier this month on July 1st. And so they will start their construction on that project in the old White Law Firm come early 2022, with an expectation to be done come 2024 for them to move in their staff. And so that's going to be a huge structure. Falls. It's about 7 high, and it'll be 2 floors of parking garage and then 5 floors of office buildings, housing over 300 employees. And so you will be able to see that structure from Church Street. And so it is definitely going to change the cityscape of the falls.
And that's a company that, in addition to having announced moving its headquarters to Greenville, which makes it now the largest bank in terms of assets, headquartered in South Carolina, they've been expanding quite a bit, or at least making moves as far as that. You had a story earlier this week about an acquisition. That's, I'm assuming, part of their long-term strategy. They seem to be growing pretty significantly.
Absolutely. One of my colleagues reported previously that their CEO, Lynn Harton, said that he plans to or hopes to increase their assets by about 2 to 2.5 billion annually. And so currently, they're at about 18.5 billion, which makes them the largest headquartered bank in South Carolina. The one that got kicked out of the top spot was Southern First. And just for comparison, Southern First only has about 2 billion assets. And so you can see how they vary in terms of size. And that acquisition that is intended to close in 2022 is with Reliant Bank, a bank based in Tennessee. And so that will, if it does close, if it's approved, will add about 3.1 billion assets to their already 18.5 billion.
Yeah, and Southern First, since you mentioned them, currently also building a new headquarters out on Verde. So a lot of bank news going there. We do have a question in the comments about kind of where all this stuff is located. And let me just stop for a second and sort of orient anyone who's not familiar with downtown. If you know where Main Street is and the bridge that comes across the river there, if you are heading into town on Main Street from the west end, you look to your right, you'll see the Grand Bohemian. That's along East Camperdown Way. United Community Bank will be right behind that. If you look to your left, beyond what you can actually see and past the Academy Street Bridge, over beyond that is where Unity Park is. And it's a massive construction zone if you head over that way. So just to help anybody who isn't quite sure where everything is, that's sort of how everything orients. Eric, let me bounce back to you. Let's kind of touch on Unity Park, but I want to use it to kind of bridge into some of the other development things that are going on. There's special zoning around Unity Park. Affordable housing has been something the city's talked about quite a bit. Where does the effort stand with that? What's going on as far as development outside of the Unity Park area, and what's new on the affordable housing front as far as the city's concerned?
Well, when it comes to affordable, a big issue with Unity Park, in addition to the river and the environment and providing a public area, was affordable housing. So as soon as you introduce, it's the largest public works project in recent memory. Once you introduce something of this size and magnitude and the sheer amount of investment, the traditionally poor people who live there are going to face the pressure of gentrification and moving out. So over the years, the city bought a whole bunch of property. No one knew what was going on over there, but they've mostly set aside a lot of it for affordable housing projects that they have control over. So we did have a question about affordable housing. And I think that you'll see that beyond those projects, what the city can control with land, when they don't have control over the land, they have to turn to regulations. And I wrote about a project earlier this week called Wimbledon Heights. It's a condo project that would overlook the Kroc Center tennis courts. So that's where the thing comes from. They have streets like 40 Love Drive and things like that. But these are luxury condos. This is 4 acres of land, and the city doesn't have control over it. And that project has been delayed in part because it doesn't fit the Unity Park development code. And one of the specific things they did is created special zoning around Unity Park that makes create certain incentives for affordable housing. And then beyond in the West End, the city is just about every project that comes through, there's a mention of affordable housing, whether it's part of the original plan, to have a more likelihood of a favorable response. But beyond that, the city has realized that to them it's not enough. So upcoming as a part of the Greenville Comprehensive Plan, part of the rewrite of the land management ordinance based on that plan was to address affordable housing. Well, recently they realized that that's going to take a long time, and in the meantime they wanted to do little pieces of what would be changes to the ordinance. And when they actually proposed a development moratorium, so this was the compromise. But a lot of those passed through, but when affordable housing came up, they said, this is just too big of an issue, so we're going to tackle it over the next course of the year. But right now, the Unity Park Code is pretty strong. It's kind of maybe a sign of what's to come. And so, yeah, when it comes to affordable housing, I mean, it almost intertwined with everything.
Right. Yeah, we should take a moment to sort of clarify and define what affordable housing is. I think we've seen a lot of people get confused and feel like it's low income housing, which it isn't necessarily, right? It has to do with the amount you spend on housing as a certain percentage of your household income of the area's median income, right? It's the idea of not necessarily creating low priced housing, but creating housing that people who want to live in town can afford, regardless of where they fall on the salary level, correct?
Yeah, so the standard for forever has been if you're spending more than 30% on basically living, then your cost burden. And that there's a lot of that in Greenville, but that depends on the person. So a teacher or a firefighter, they're not going to need a huge subsidy. They're just going to need a little just to get by. And they're trying to focus on that. And the idea is to have these new luxury projects come in, set aside a few units for, like housing that resembles the other housing, and spread it out. And they do that through incentives. So there's all kinds of different levels. It's not your old 1970s. What became slums, they realized that doesn't work. So it's definitely a bunch of moving parts to try to fit all the needs.
Got a question coming in. It's kind of long, so I'm gonna read it here in a minute and come back to it. So we may bounce back to Wimbledon Heights here in a second. But while we're touching on that, we've also done a lot of reporting on development going on in the West End and elsewhere. Can you give us just a little bit of information about what's going on there before we sort of move on to some of the other projects?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Can you give us a little bit of an update on the West End? There's a significant number of projects, just a block or two
Gotcha.
out from the area we're talking about.
I got you. I was trying to read that question, which is not a good idea. Yeah, so the West End area is seeing a whole lot of pressure that also is putting, I guess, gentrification pressure. There's a project that would replace the West End Community Development Center. That doesn't include, there's a project called the Mosaic, which billed itself as an affordable housing project, but it was an example of how these days, kind of a new development is just because you have affordable housing as an element doesn't mean it's going to go through. So I think that developers are learning that they're still going to be held to a certain standard when they, even though affordable housing is a main part of their development. And so you've got all kinds of stuff in the West End that's spurring a desire for people to live there, which is floor field expanding, having an entertainment district, and the city is about probably next month to adopt a small area plan for the West End to try to rein some of this in and control it.
Right. And in reference to the question that came in about Wimbledon Heights, we should clarify, it was supposed to go before the Planning Commission this month. They pulled it back. It may go in front again. So it's not something that's been before the Planning Commission, been rejected, anything like that. It's just a work in progress. So clearly we'll have more updates on that. And what we expect is probably a tremendous amount more development, especially as Unity Park starts to come together. Erica, I want to move on to a couple other big city projects. Let's bounce back down the Reedy again and talk about the possibility, maybe the probability of City Hall making a move. What's the latest as far as possibly moving out of the tower and down by the river?
Right. So this is something that I think probably has been talked about for a very long time, but at least dates back to last December, the idea of selling City Hall, which was built in 1973. And the old Bowater building, which is right on the river there, was built in 91, 92. And so it's owned by partly by the developer of Camperdown, which they've had a lot of cooperation or some infrastructure improvements, and hopefully for, the trade-off is that there'll be new tax money. So they've worked together a lot, and what they're planning to do is swap out basically, if they can strike a deal, the city easier to access, more of a centerpiece on the river. They also see it as a way to protect that part of the river. City Hall, it's uncertain what would happen to it. It seemed like it would be torn down, but who knows? And the status of that was originally, they talked back in May when they late May, right around Memorial Day, when they publicly talked about this. It was supposed to be end of June. They'd have a deal. I talked to the city manager a week or so ago, and he said they're still on track, and probably next month there'll be a deal to present to city council. And the idea is that they close on it November 1st. So it sounds like to me that it's possible by the new year that they might begin moving over there.
Okay, and Eric, let me give you a second to read that Unity Park question again, and I'm going to let you take a stab at answering it here in a second. Let me update everybody on sort of where everything is located again. So the Bowater building, if you look if you're standing at the falls, you look just to the left of where the Grand Bohemian's being built, that's the Bowater building. It's 55 East Camperdown Way. It's kind of in between that and the new Camperdown Tower development. So right there along the river. And so kind of that's where it lies. And that connects mostly what we're talking about today, which is sort of the extension of the development. Eric, take a stab at those various points, and I just want to quickly make sure we've answered that question properly.
Right. Yeah, I think I can.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So I understand the question is that objections to these plans, and it was proposed before the Planning Commission, and it was delayed. So it was never actually considered, but the city staff did write a report that recommended denial for this project based on some design issues. And one of the issues that
Wimbledon Heights is what we're talking about.
Yeah, Wimbledon Heights, the tennis development. There were some very specific things that they cited for denial, but then overall they also mentioned things that were lacking in the project. And it's kind of one of these in the weeds things, I think, that to me is related to affordable housing, is that there's a whole lot more units that could be built on that property. And that's the way when we talk about affordable housing, that if you give incentives for developers to build more units, that allows them, a greater return on investment, more opportunity. Luxury condos that are not really maximizing the number of units that they could put on the property, there's less opportunity for affordable housing. So in some ways, the way the city does these regulations is you're almost implying affordable housing, but it shows the limitations of what they can do.
One other question came in, Eric, about sustainable initiatives. There's a question related to the gathering hall at Unity Park, possibly being made of sustainable wood. Do you know anything about that, or do we need to check on that one after?
That's I don't know about that.
All
so
right,
that's
Cameron,
something
we're gonna get an answer for you, and we'll include it when we post this video online later. Quickly, Eric, we've got just a minute or so. The convention center, the proposed new convention center. What do you know about that?
Well, that's been talked about a long time. A couple of years ago, they came up with this idea for they like to call it a conference center because it's different than the big shows and all of that. It's collaboration between the county and the city and the state, and the city and county are on board. The idea is that 26 million each between the three of them would fund this thing, and there's private developers, Phil Hughes and Bo Watry, who donated the land. And there was the state earmarked some money previously, and there was a question this year about COVID whether there would be an ability to do that. And a couple of weeks ago, the state did earmark that money, so that project is apparently on track. But it remains to be seen, what the timeline is, and I'm sure they're going to need to get some input and take everything out there and run it up.
Definitely a longer term project. That, of course, located on the east side of Academy Street, right before the Academy Street Bridge going across the Reedy. So right downtown in the same area we're talking about. That's all the time we have today. We will be back next month. Topic to be determined. If you'd like to watch this again or send it to a friend, we will post the recording of this on our website. If you want to do that, postingcourier.com/beyond-the-headlines, or you can just search for it. You can support our work by signing up for any of our free newsletters, postingcourier.com/greenville/newsletter-sign up. Do please sign up for those. We send out, there are 4 of those a week now that you can choose from. Paid subscribers make our brand of journalism possible and help our community stay informed. We would appreciate your support and your subscription. You can see more about how to subscribe to us at postingcourier.com/greenville/subscribe. If you've never subscribed to us before, we're running a very special offer right now, $4 for 4 months. That's about as good a deal as you're going to get. Try us out, give us a shot. We would also appreciate if you'd support our investigative efforts. You can go to postandcourier.com and look for the donate button to learn more about those initiatives. On behalf of Eric, Stephanie, and the entire Post and Courier team, I appreciate your time. We'll see you again soon. Until next time, goodbye. Thank you.
The Post and Courier being a family-owned local brand to the state that's committed to journalism provides that network that I don't think you're going to get anywhere else. The Post and Courier brand gives off a sense of optimism and opportunity. We answer to readers and we answer to a higher calling. Money that's invested into the newspaper is invested back into the community. By subscribing, you allow us to keep doing what we're doing and be a part of something bigger that connects South Carolina